The 2023 season is just under 1 week away now, as the season opener against LSU is this weekend. So before the season started, I just wanted to do a few videos relating to the season itself. So tonight we're going to be discussing some bold predictions for 2023. I have a handful of these here, some of them that I came up with, the other ones I gathered from friends and family since we're not quite big enough yet for you guys to submit your predictions. But here we go, 10 bold predictions for FSU in 2023. The first one up is that FSU wins the national championship. Now, I may be a homer and I may even sunshine pump on here a little bit, but I truly don't see this one happening. Is it possible? Absolutely. And I think that it's very likely that we could make the playoffs this year, even with a potential loss. But once you get to the playoffs, you're more than likely going to be facing a Georgia or an Ohio State. And I just don't know that this team is quite on that same level as those programs. As good and exciting as last season was, let's be honest, you still lost 3 games, including 2 to Wake Forest and NC State. Now, I fully expect this 23 team to be far better than 2022, but I'm not sold that you've entered UGA territory just yet. Now, if you happen to draw a one-off team, kind of like TCU last year in the first round, maybe you beat them and then get to the national championship, but I still feel like all roads lead back to Georgia right now. Don't get me wrong, I'd love nothing more than to beat UGA and win that trophy, but I just feel like you're a little outmatched there still. Now, the other side of this coin is that you're arguably one of the most experienced teams in the entire country. UGA, Ohio State, and even Bama are all breaking in new quarterbacks this year. Maybe if the day is right, you could potentially catch a younger team playing a little bit sloppy, and then who knows what could happen. Florida State brought in a lot of elite transfers as well, so maybe if the team stays healthy and all these transfers mesh well together, maybe the Florida State team does become dominant. We'll definitely get a glimpse here in about a week or so, but I just can't predict that one just yet. Now, following this one, I see one that says Florida State is a bit overhyped and loses 3 or more regular season games in 2023. Now, honestly, I do think it's more likely that Florida State gets to the national championship than it is that they lose 3 or more games. The way the schedule stacks up, yeah, your month of September is a little rough playing LSU week 1 and then going to Clemson in week 4. But I at least expect to split those games, and I'd argue that the team could easily still get out of September 4-0. But after that, the schedule really isn't that hard. You have Miami at home, and I'm not worried about that game. You do have to go to Pitt and then to Florida at the end of the season, but those are really the 3 hardest games left after September on your schedule, and I just don't see that you lose more than one of those games, if any. I think Florida State's floor is 10-2 this season, and I think that would even be a little bit disappointing for the expectations and hype that they have going into the season. I think the only way Florida State loses more than 3 games is if the wheels fall off, or maybe you have some really bad injury luck of some kind. Next one we have is predicting that Jordan Travis wins the Heisman Trophy. Now I'm going to start this one by saying that Jordan Travis should absolutely end up being at least a finalist and invited to New York. My first video on this channel was all about why I think Jordan Travis could in fact win the Heisman Trophy. Now let's look at the odds here. According to BetMGM, Jordan Travis is tied for 4th best odds to win the Heisman. Caleb Williams is, of course, the betting favorite at plus 500. Jaden Daniels is second at plus 900. Quinn Ewers at plus 1,000. And then Jordan Travis and Bo Nix tied both together at plus 1,200. So that means if you bet $100 and Jordan Travis wins the Heisman, you make $1,200. Now, I have no clue how Jaden Daniels is the second betting favorite. It's not hard to see that Jordan Travis is far and away the better quarterback. Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy last year, and winning it back-to-back is just something that doesn't happen. It happened once, like 60 years ago or something like that. And I'll say it again. If Lamar Jackson doesn't win it twice, neither will Caleb Williams. Now, I think that should firmly put Jordan Travis in the top 2 best odds to win the Heisman Trophy. Not to mention that Jaden Daniels and Jordan Travis obviously face off in the season opener in just 6 days. So I'd say the winner of that game gets a huge boost in the odds. And by the way, I fully expect Florida State to win that one, especially with LSU star defensive lineman Mason Smith being suspended. So yeah, I don't think this one is all that bold, really. I think he'll at least be a finalist. And if FSU goes 11-1 or even 12-0 possibly, I see it very likely that Jordan Travis can win the Heisman Trophy. Now here's a fun little roster prediction. This one says that Brock Glenn finishes the season closer to QB1 than QB3. So this one basically insinuates that Brock Glenn can show enough between now and next September to overtake Tate Rodemaker as a starter for 2024. You may be asking, but what about A.J. Duffy? Frankly, I think Duffy transfers out after the season. I don't see him taking many meaningful snaps in the Seminoles jersey. I'm not knocking the kid by any stretch, but it just doesn't sound like he's taken that next step that the staff needed to see. I'm hearing that they really like what they see with Brock Glenn, and they think he's coming along nicely. He apparently looked really good in the last scrimmage game as well. Now, as far as him overtaking Tate, if we were starting the 2024 season right now, I think Tate is your starter. But it does sound like Brock Glenn is on pace to become a major threat by the time that this all actually does come around, and who knows? I think Mike Norvell will try to ride with Tate as long as he can, but if Brock Glenn just shows out, I think he could definitely snag that starting job. It's definitely still too early in Glenn's career to predict that he could start here next season, but I don't think Tate is elite. I think he's just average, so all Brock really has to do is be above average, and I think the job is his at that point. We'll keep an eye on the season. I fully expect Glenn to get some garbage time reps, so we'll get a better sense of how he handles a live game and how he progresses throughout his freshman year. But 1 to 10, 10 being the boldest, I'd say this one sits at about a 6 or a 7. But it's definitely interesting. Another roster one we have is that Destin Hill has over 500 receiving yards this year. Now, I know people are anxious to see him after all the drama with his enrollment. Florida State fans weren't even 100% sold that the kid even existed not too long ago. It sounds like he's looked very good and is definitely turning some heads. It also sounds like he's stayed in really good shape over these last 2 years being away from football. And I do expect him to see some playing time, but I think fans may want to try to temper their hopes and expectations for him this year. Not saying he's not good or not ready or anything like that at all. It sounds like he's a tremendous athlete, and I fully expect him to have a very productive career at Florida State. But this year, he is a little bit older, but it's still technically his freshman year, and his receiving core is already elite. Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell, Kentron Portier, I think those are all your guys for this season. And that's a great group of guys to have. Florida State definitely has a top 5 receiver room in the entire country. So I don't know what you get out of trying to rush him this year. I've heard maybe they try him at punt returner, which is interesting, and maybe there's something there. And I do think he will play some garbage time reps, and maybe he'll sneak in a bit here and there, kind of like Deuce Spann last season. But I don't see him having 500 or more receiving yards this season, barring injury to maybe one of the starting guys that I mentioned a second ago. Hey guys, not to interrupt the video, but I did want to take a second to ask that if you're enjoying talking Florida State football, please consider dropping a like on this video and hitting that subscribe button below. It really means a lot and will hopefully eventually allow me to grow and improve this channel and future content. Now on to the next 5 predictions. Next one is that Keon Coleman has more receiving yards and touchdowns than Johnny Wilson. Now, this is a tough one. I think both guys are very, very good receivers that are even capable of playing in the NFL. If Johnny wasn't so prone to drops, I'd say that there's no way. Now, Keon Coleman is a bit shorter than Johnny Wilson, but he wins his matchups and he runs really good routes. I'll say this. I could see Keon maybe having slightly more receiving yards, but I think Johnny Wilson's higher at 6'7". It's just too much of a threat in the red zone. So I think they do a lot of high point touchdown passes to Johnny, and then that ultimately leads him to having more touchdowns than Keon. But if you're asking me if Keon will have more receiving yards and touchdowns, I'm going to say no. On the next one, we have that Renardo Green will be our best corner, not transfer Fentrell Cypress. I like this one, and I actually agree with it. I know everybody's high on Fentrell Cypress, but I think Renardo Green looked really good last year. And with new DBs coach Pat Surtain aiding in the development of these guys, I could absolutely see him taking another step forward. Now, Cypress was reportedly underwhelming in the spring. It sounds like he's kind of came on a little bit here in preseason camp, and that could just be because of his experience. Not all older guys like that go quite as hard in the spring. They more so wait until preseason to kind of dial it in. And I do like Cypress. I think that he'll firmly be in that starting rotation of corners. But I think at the end of the year, I'll be talking a little bit more about Renardo Green than Fentrell Cypress. Ooh, this one's going to be a little controversial. This one says that this is the best Florida State team since 2013. Now, keep in mind, Florida State hasn't been great every year since. There's even been some downright terrible teams in between now and then. But there has been a couple good ones. I think Florida State is better this year than they were in 2022. I mean, you pretty much brought everyone back, so it's essentially the same team, and then you just added a top group of transfers on top of that. 2021 was bad, 2020 was just awful, and then there's the 2 years under Taggart that were just horrible. This team destroys the 2017 team, which is when Jimbo left. So I'd say the only other 2 competitors here are the 2014 team and then the 2016 team with DeAndre Francois and Dalvin Cook. I think this team beats the 2014 team. Granted that team went undefeated, but they had a lot of holes and a lot of issues. That offensive line wasn't great, and a lot of those wins were just ugly wins before getting torched by Oregon in the playoffs. I think this team is overall better than 2014 was. Now, 2016 is a tough one. You have good running backs on both, though I think Jaquez Patrick and Dalvin Cook are a better duo than Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili. I'll say that this current offensive line is better than the 2016 group. I think it's deeper, better, and more experienced. I think this group of wide receivers is better than the ones they had in 2016. That being said, I'd pay good money to see the 2016 team go against the 2023 team. I think that would be a really good matchup to watch. I'd say overall it's very close. I'll go ahead and give the push to the 2023 team just because I've been drinking the Kool-Aid and I'm excited to see how they perform on the field. But let's revisit this one after the season. Next one is predicting that even despite losing Jamie Robinson, Florida State doesn't see a regression at the safety position. Now, I guess this one kind of depends on how you look at it. Florida State's DBs were not good last year, and I think that put more of a workload on Jamie Robinson, who was Florida State's leading tackler in 2022. Now, I think our corners will look much better this year, which could in turn make the safety position look better. It's also possible that one of these younger guys step up. I'm particularly excited about Conrad Hussey. I think he'll be an absolute stud for FSU. I just don't know that will happen this season, but we'll have to see. I do like Akeem Dent and Shaheem Brown as well. I think if those guys have taken a step from last year, this is absolutely possible. But I still prefer to have Jamie on the roster since he was just such a reliable player. Now, this last one is something that we'll find out in less than a week. This one comes from a friend of mine who's actually an Ohio State fan, but he says Florida State beats LSU by 10 points or more. Even a few weeks ago, I may have said no to this one, but there's been some developments here, starting with Mason Smith, the star defensive line for LSU, being suspended for this game. Now, Smith also missed most of the game last year after tearing his ACL in the first quarter. On top of that, LSU has had two players in their secondary who were kicked off the team, including Denver Harris, who was projected to be their starter. This is going to make the game much harder for the LSU defense, especially the secondary that was already outmatched to begin with. I'm starting to see a path here where LSU just won't be able to keep up with this high-powered Florida State offense. I think it really just boils down to how good is this Florida State defense. With the additions of Fentrell Cypress and Braden Fisk, and another year of Verse, Fabo, Deloach, etc., I could definitely see Florida State winning by 2 possessions or more. And it also helps that Florida State has never lost in Orlando. So I like this one. So there you have it. That's 10 bold predictions for this coming up season. And I gotta admit, this was actually a fun video to make. And these were some fun predictions to think and talk about. So maybe we'll end up doing more videos like this one. But guys, the season is just 6 days away. And then Florida State football is back. Hopefully starting off the season with a big win against LSU. But let me know what you think of these predictions. And please comment and tell me some bold predictions you guys may have. Like, subscribe, and let's talk Noles.